So moving on to, let's see, um, eighth notes. This is where this is where I've definitely seen like things get more confusing, things get a little dicey. And I'll say that not to not to throw shade or hate on anyone or anything like this, but I used to focus on saying down, up, down, up, down, up. Um, and I abandoned that a while ago because while it definitely gets the students moving their hand correctly and it gets them to typically be able to play these rhythms, I found like long term, like when we get to say more complex rhythms or when we get to 16th note rhythms, it's kind of more of a crutch. And then ultimately, it seems like I'd had to go back and teach counting anyway. So I'm a huge proponent of teaching the counting right away in conjunction with the downs and ups. So what my big focus with students when it comes to eighth notes is number one, obviously I tell them what eighth notes are, right? We go into the like fractions of beats and things like that. Um, Giving them that messaging that's first off, when you play eighth notes, your right hand is moving exactly the same way as it would when you're playing a measure of quarter notes. They just don't think about it, right? So like the students don't really think about when they're strumming quarter notes that their hand is going down and up in a steady pace. They're just focused on those down strums. And now we just kind of focus on the up strums in addition too. So always telling them that the down strums are what are called your down beats, 1, 2, 3, 4. The up strums are always your ands. And so by kind of putting that messaging out there and constantly reminding them that the counting coordinates with this right hand movement, it almost becomes like this reinforcing behavior where if that's not happening, something's wrong. Something's wrong with your strumming. And that's sort of a cue that they can sort of look at. I like to use an analogy I like to use is the pendulum on a grandfather clock. So that's sort of a visual for the students to think about how like if like a pendulum on the grandfather clock is always moving back and forth, that's like your right hand. If your hand were to pause like this or pause down here, thinking about what would be going on with the grandfather clock if the pendulum was like tick, 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 then it would be broken, right? It's not working. So that's the analogy I like to use. So after going through all of that, and I spent a lot of time on that stuff, then I'd go through the process with the first exercise on, this is page 21, so the eighth notes. So similarly, now what I'm doing is I'm just sort of lining up the counting with those notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and writing them in. So there's your visual. Then you have the student count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and keep going through that. The kinesthetics, then finally the playing. This is where I go back to just single chords again, just focusing on single chords with the left hand, so they're just focusing on that rhythm with the right hand. Again, it can be D and E minor. It can be, you can add other chords, whatever, but same process. You write it out, you get them counting it, you get their hand moving, and then you strum it. Usually number one, super smooth. Number two, usually not an issue either. But what I do with number two, because we have that quarter note at the end, that's where I can sort of get a read on the student about whether or not they understand how their right hand is supposed to work when they're strumming eighth notes. Because we'll go through that process again, right? So the writing it out is the visual. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And I make a big deal of saying, so we've got a 4, we're counting at the end of that measure, that's a quarter note, just like we played quarter notes way back in the beginning. But what we're doing is we're allowing that up strum after that down strum on the four to keep time for us. Again, like the pendulum on a grandfather clock. So go through the strumming, then I have them count it 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Then with the right hand, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. That's the kinesthetics. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Then we transition into 3 and 4. 1 and you guys have seen it. I know you've seen it where they'll go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Right? And so that pause, even just like that little cue of seeing them pause at the bottom of their down strum and then like speed up to the top, I try and smooth that stuff out like right away and point it out. Like, yes, they played it right. Yes, it sounds right. But long term, if we can get the mechanics a little bit smoother, then that's going to translate moving forward. Then we go through like the exact same stuff through the rest of this one. And we don't have to go through that. But okay, questions, thoughts? Anyone want to push back on the idea of like the downs and ups versus the counting?
No, I don't. I think the way that you have it in here is the right way to do it, where you have the rhythm, but then you also have the downs and the ups written above it, so they know what direction they're supposed to go on what beat. But yeah, I agree with you about like the kind of keeping the arm moving and not just having it be nice and smooth.
Yeah,
Yeah, that
long
makes
and
a
short
lot of
of it,
sense to me.
I just don't want the downs and the ups to be a crutch that they use to get
Right.
through
Yeah.
long term. Like, and
Totally get.
again, translating it back to what happens as they progress. I mean, again, Tony, you can appreciate this because of like, I mean, I don't even know all the techniques and the efficiency picking. Like
Mhm.
when it comes to shredding, all of that stuff is all alternate picked and like
Hmm.
Yep.
you got to be solid and right on with that stuff.
Hmm.
And it all comes back to like that fundamental understanding of rhythms and how everything relates to like the beat. So yeah.
Hmm. For sure.
Okay. And I'll also add that um I mean I think like in that learning stage, the saying down and up versus okay, like get a little philosophical here. Saying downs and ups versus the counting. Long term, I think there's very little difference between the two because what you're ultimately doing is you're trying to get to that audiation stage, right? Like because if you
Yeah.
were to say like down up down up down up down down up down up down up down, that's exactly what the right hand is doing, but that's also exactly like what you want to hear. But what's the big difference between saying down up down up down up down down up or 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 when you go from like the the visual to the audiation ultimately to the strumming, you know? I just feel like there's more benefit in the counting. um but yes, I agree, like I think the downs and ups are important to reinforce how the movement of the hand goes. um as long as we're saying like, okay, notice how you're always strumming down on the downbeat, you're always strumming up on the upbeat, and there you go. um all right, so you can do chord changes, and I encourage it with that page too. I encourage chord changes with like after every one of these where you're focusing first just on the rhythms and then adding chord changes. And the book's got these little like progress tracker things in here too. Um, so the next page of strumming, this is where I put in ties and dotted quarter notes. Now I've gotten a little pushback from some of the other people I've given these exercises to, um, with how I use ties in the middle of a measure. Because like if you look at, so we're on page 25. First exercise, all eighth notes, but then you've got a tie on the and of 3 to the 4. So you're tying those together. So sure, two eighth notes tied together is a quarter note. So it could have been written like a bank of 4 eighth notes, then a single eighth note and a quarter note and a single eighth note. For my purposes, knowing that this is like for student use, I want them to, one, build on the knowledge that they gained from the previous understanding of eighth notes. So to be able to see those two eighth notes tied together, and then on top of that, with on the 4 beat, there's no indicator for a down strum. That's my rationale for using the tie rather than a quarter note. Probably a longer explanation than you guys even needed or wanted, but there it is. So that way they still can visually see all the eighth notes in that measure, and there's sort of those visual cues for what to do. So then when you go to write in that rhythm, you've got 1 and 2 and 3 and
And
getting counting that 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and all of the rhythms on the previous section of eighth notes, anytime they were missing a strum with their right hand, it was always missing an up strum. Here, the first 3 exercises, anytime they're going to miss the string attack on a strum, it's going to be missing an up strum. So what it's teaching them to do is sort of accent those up strums and miss those down strums. Because I found most students, they have a harder time with playing a quarter note on an upbeat than playing a quarter note on a downbeat, because it just feels awkward. It feels new. So you write it down, you get that audiation going, the kinesthetics 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and again, look out for the students that go 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and where they've got that pause there. Again, I reinforce that grandfather clock metaphor, and then ultimately, like, you're playing it. This is another area where I feel like focusing on the counting is going to be beneficial when you go to do chord changes. If your chord changes are on the 1, on a measure, right? So they're going to have a harder time making a chord change with this first exercise, because you've got that missed down strum, and then you're going to hit that up strum, and then you got to make that chord change quick, like 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and so tendency is for like people to want to change where there's more space. So again, all the more reason I think to reinforce the counting, because then you can say, no, you got to hit that chord change on the 1, like on the 1 beat. And as these downs and ups get more complicated, navigating where those chord changes happen gets confusing if you focus on downs and ups versus chord changes on the 1 or your chord changes on the and. Okay, so yeah, you go through the same stuff here. Number four is where you add a quarter note and you've got a tie to accent those up strums. Number 4 is also like guitar players' favorite rhythm. 1, 2 and 4 and 1, 2 and 4 and. So, I mean, for me, by the time I get students there, I'm like, all right, game time. We're playing songs, right? Let's find every single song we can find to play with that rhythm.
Brown Eyed Girl.
Yep. Yeah. Brown Eyed Girl, Good Riddance.
Yeah.
What else? I don't know.
Million.
Yeah, right. Or just use that one with like whatever song they want to play, and usually it works. Dotted quarter notes, very similar. Obviously, you're going to explain what a dotted quarter note is, but relate it back to the movement of that right hand. Well, how many movements of your right hand or your strumming hand is the dotted quarter note? Well, it's three. So you've got the down, miss, miss, right? So down strum, up strum is exactly how long that dotted quarter note should be. So that's number 6.